There are moments when the weight of this world feels unbearable, when the sorrow within you is so great that you begin to believe you are broken beyond repair. You wake in the morning with no desire to rise, and you lie down at night feeling as though no place on this earth is truly your home. And perhaps the world has given you a name for this feeling. They call it depression, sadness, an affliction of the mind. The weight of divine calling is not a light thing to bear, nor is it a path often chosen willingly. It presses upon the soul like an unseen hand, urging one forward even when the road is unclear. There is a sorrow that accompanies this calling, a sorrow that does not stem from mere sadness, but from seeing what others refuse to see. When a prophet walks among men, he does not walk as they do. His eyes are fixed on things higher, his ears are tuned to whispers that others do not perceive. And this, though it is a gift, often feels like a burden too great to carry. There is a reason why those called to speak truth often wrestle with despair. It is not because they lack faith, nor because they have strayed, but because the truth they carry isolates them. The world moves in a rhythm they cannot follow, chasing after vanities while their soul burns with something far deeper. They see the brokenness not as something to be ignored, but as something that must be answered, and the weight of seeing, of knowing, becomes too much. They are not merely troubled by their own sorrows, they feel the grief of a world that has turned away from its maker. Such sorrow is not a sign of failure, but a mark of calling. It is the very sorrow that rested upon the prophets of old, the anguish that drove them to cry out when the world remains silent. The weight of this calling is not given to all, because not all can bear it. And yet, to those whom it is given, it is not given in cruelty but in purpose. This sorrow is not meant to destroy but to refine, to awaken a voice that will not be silenced. The world may call it affliction, but heaven calls it preparation. To be set apart is not a punishment, though it may feel like one. There is an ache in the soul of those who walk a different path, a loneliness that cannot be filled by the company of those who do not understand. The prophets of old were men and women who walked alone, not because they desired isolation, but because they could not follow the ways of the world. Their eyes were fixed on a kingdom unseen, and the language they spoke was one the world had long forgotten. When you find yourself standing at a distance, watching as others move through life with ease, do not mistake this separation for abandonment. It is not that you have been cast aside, but that you have been set apart for something greater. This solitude is not wasted. It is here, in the quiet, that a prophet learns to hear. The noise of the world is silenced, and in its place comes a voice that speaks not to the ears, but to the heart. It is in this place of seeming emptiness that the soul is shaped, that the burden of calling is made clear. If you feel that you walk alone, it is because your path is different. The crowd moves in one direction, but your steps are guided by a force unseen. The ache of solitude is real, but so is its purpose. There is a refining that takes place in these moments, a preparation that cannot be rushed. The weight of divine purpose is not given to those who remain entangled in the distractions of the world, but to those who have been drawn away, who have been prepared in the quiet places where no one is watching. The heart wrestles with this. It is not easy to stand apart, to feel the pull of something greater when the world urges you to settle for less. There is a deep longing to belong, to find a place where the soul is understood. And yet, time and time again, the prophet finds that they do not fit. They try to enter conversations, to share in the joys of the world, but something within them resists. They are restless, unable to make peace with the things that satisfy others, and so they withdraw, wondering if something is wrong, if they are broken in some unspoken way. But they are not broken, they are being prepared. There is a difference between being rejected and being set apart. The world may not recognize the difference, but heaven does. The longing for companionship, for understanding, is not wrong, but it must not lead one to forsake the calling placed upon them. A prophet's journey is not about comfort, but about purpose, and though it may be lonely, it is never without meaning. Those who are called to see, to speak, to bear witness to truth, will often find themselves walking a path few can follow, but it is in this very solitude that they are drawn closest to the one who called them. There is a fire within you that does not let you rest. While others are content to drift through life, preoccupied with trivialities, you feel an unease that refuses to be silenced. It is not a restlessness that can be cured by distractions or indulgences, for it is not rooted in a lack of fulfillment, but in the presence of a greater calling. This holy discontent is not a flaw, but a sign that you were never meant to settle for the things that satisfy others. The comforts of this world feel empty because your soul longs for something higher, something eternal. You sense that there is a greater reality beyond what the eye can see, and no matter how much you try to suppress it, the ache remains. This stirring is not new. The prophets before you felt it too. They were men and women who could not sit idly while truth was abandoned, who could not rest while the world turned away from what is good. The weight of their calling made them restless because they carried the burden of heaven's sorrow. They saw what others ignored, and they grieved over the blindness of those around them. Their hearts burned with a purpose they could not explain, and though the world dismissed them as troubled souls, they knew that the unrest within them was not disorder, it was divine. If you feel this ache, this inability to conform to the world's ways, do not despise it. It is a sign that you are not meant to live as others do. You are being called to stand, to speak, to shine a light where darkness prevails. But this calling comes with a price. Those who burn with this holy fire often find themselves at odds with the world. They speak, and they are misunderstood. They warn, and they are ridiculed. They call for change, and they are rejected. It has always been this way. The world does not welcome those who disrupt its comforts. It resists those who challenge its illusions. The fire within you remains. It is not easily extinguished, for it does not come from you. It comes from above. It is the same fire that burned in the hearts of the prophets, the same fire that compelled them to speak when silence would have been easier. Though the path is difficult, though the burden is heavy, know this, you are not lost, nor are you alone. The very fact that you feel this way is proof that you are being prepared for something greater. Let the fire burn. Let it shape you. Let it lead you into the purpose for which you were created. There is a sorrow within you that you cannot explain, a weight on your soul that does not seem to lift. You walk through life seeing what others do not, feeling burdens they ignore. When the world celebrates, something within you remains unsettled. When others are entertained, you are grieved. It is not because you lack joy, but because your heart is tuned to something higher. You feel the weight of things unseen, the heaviness of a world that has turned away from its maker. This is not weakness. This is not despair. This is the sorrow of a soul that sees with the eyes of heaven. The prophets before you felt it too. They were not men of ease, nor did they walk lightly through life. They carried the burdens of nations, the grief of a world that refused to listen. They wept when others laughed. They mourned over the sins that no one else acknowledged. And though they often stood alone, their sorrow was not meaningless. It was a sign that they were chosen to see what others would not. Their tears were not wasted. They were the prayers of the righteous, the groanings of a heart aligned with the divine. This sorrow often makes you feel out of place. You long to rejoice as others do, to move through life without this weight pressing upon you. But no matter how much you try, the burden remains. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are carrying something greater than yourself, a calling that will not let you rest until it has been fulfilled. The world may not understand you, but heaven does. This sorrow is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to shape you, to awaken within you a voice that will not be silenced. Let it do its work. Let it lead you into the purpose for which you were made. You move through the world and see what others do not. Where they see normalcy, you see brokenness. Where they find comfort, you feel unease. It is not because you wish to be different, but because your heart is burdened with a vision others have not yet received. You notice the cracks beneath the surface, the quiet suffering behind the laughter, the emptiness behind the distractions. When others are content, something in you stirs. When others turn away, you cannot. The weight of what you see presses upon your soul, making you feel as though you carry something too heavy to bear. This is not an accident. It is the mark of one who has been called to witness, to discern, to weep for what is broken. The prophets of old were not blind to the suffering of their people. They did not turn away when the world fell into corruption. They grieved over what others ignored. They cried out when others remained silent. Their hearts were not hardened, nor were they indifferent. They felt deeply, painfully, relentlessly. and so do you. There are moments when you wish you could unsee, when you long for the bliss of ignorance. You watch as others move through life untouched by the burdens you carry, and you wonder why you cannot do the same. But you are not meant to walk in blindness. Your eyes have been opened for a reason. The sensitivity you carry is not a weakness, it is a gift. It is proof that you have been set apart, that your heart beats in rhythm with something greater than yourself. The world may not understand your grief, but heaven does. Every tear you shed, every ache you feel is seen. You are not carrying this burden alone. The one who called you walks beside you, sustaining you in the weight of what you bear. Do not harden your heart to ease the pain. Do not silence your voice to fit in. You were not made to be indifferent. You were made to see, to feel, to speak. Let the burden do its work in you, for it is not in vain. There is a constant war within you, a battle between what the world demands and what your soul knows to be true. You watch as people conform to systems built on pride, greed, and deception. Yet something within you resists. You cannot follow blindly. You cannot make peace with what you know is false. This struggle is not a sign of rebellion, but of purpose. You were not made to fit into the patterns of this world. You were made to stand apart, to challenge, to call others to something higher. From the beginning, those who carried the truth have been met with resistance. The prophets before you were not embraced by the world. They were rejected, mocked, cast aside, not because they were wrong, but because their very presence disturbed those who wanted to remain in darkness. When truth enters a place of deception, it is not welcomed, it is fought. And so you find yourself in conflict, not because you seek it, but because it seeks you. The world will always push back against those who refuse to bow to its ways. It would be easier to remain silent, to blend in, to ignore the things that grieve your spirit. But something within you will not allow it. You try to walk the same path as others, yet you find no peace there. The conversations of the world feel empty. Its pursuits seem meaningless. And when you speak of what truly matters, you are met with confusion, even hostility. It is not that you wish to be different, but that you cannot pretend to be blind. The truth within you demands to be spoken. You may wonder why this struggle is necessary, why the road of conviction is so often met with loneliness. But this is the path of those who carry light into darkness. If you were at peace with the ways of the world, it would mean you had lost sight of what you were called to. The very fact that you wrestle, that you cannot accept what is false, is proof that you were made for something greater. Do not despise the struggle. It is shaping you, refining you, preparing you for the purpose set before you. Though the world resists you, heaven stands with you. There is a fire within you that refuses to be extinguished. You've tried to quiet it, to ignore the pull, to walk as others do, but something inside you will not rest. This fire is not of your own making. It did not begin with you, nor can it be put out by human effort. It is the same fire that burned in the hearts of those who came before you, those who spoke truth in the face of resistance, those who stood firm when the world turned against them. It is not a fire of destruction, but of refinement, shaping you into what you were meant to be. There are moments when this fire feels like a burden, when the weight of your calling presses too heavily upon your soul. You may feel weary, longing for an easier path, but this fire was never meant to consume you. It was meant to strengthen you. It burns away what is false, leaving only what is true. And though you may not always understand why you have been chosen to carry it, you must trust that it was placed within you for a reason. The world will try to smother it. It will tell you to be quiet, to conform, to abandon what you know in exchange for comfort. But this fire does not belong to the world, and it does not answer to its commands. It is placed within you by the one who calls and sustains, the one who sees beyond what you can see. No matter how strong the opposition, no matter how weary you may feel, the fire will not go out. It will carry you forward, even when you think you cannot take another step. It will light your path. It will accomplish what it was meant to do, for what is set aflame by the divine cannot be undone. You are not lost. You are not broken. The weight you carry, the sorrow you feel, the fire that burns within you, they are not signs of weakness, but of calling. The world may not understand you, may even reject you, but you were never meant to belong to it. You were set apart, chosen to see what others ignore, to speak when others remain silent, to walk a road few are willing to travel. This path is not easy, but it is necessary. Do not mistake your struggle for failure. Do not let your loneliness convince you that you are abandoned. Every prophet, every voice of truth has walked this road before you. They too felt the ache of solitude, the sting of rejection, the burden of a vision that others could not grasp. Yet they endured, not by their own strength, but by the power of the one who called them. And so will you. Let the fire burn. Let the weight refine you. Let the sorrow draw you closer to the one who placed it in your heart. You are not merely troubled, you are being prepared. You are not forsaken, you are being shaped. And when the time comes, when your voice is needed, you will rise, not as one broken by the world, but as one who has been made strong through the very trials that sought to undo you. The world may not recognize you, but heaven does, and that is enough.